There's something quietly magical about the first page of a book, isn't there? It always feels as though it's waiting, not demanding, not insisting, just resting there in its own softness, patient and unhurried. And when you touch it, when your fingers gently slide across the edge and lift it for the very first time, there's this tender little sound, almost like a sigh, a breath, a greeting whispered only to you. Sometimes when the room is quiet and the night feels a little too large, that tiny sound is enough to remind you that silence doesn't have to be empty. It can be gentle, it can be warm. And as you sit there, feeling the cool, smooth texture of the paper against your hand, it almost feels as though the page itself has exhaled in sync with you, the two of you sharing a small, private rhythm. Do you know that moment? When you're aware of your own breathing, not in a stressful way, but in that calm, settling way where the inhale rolls in like a soft wave and the exhale drifts out like a slow breeze. The page seems to follow that rhythm. As it lifts, it rises with the inhale. As it falls, it settles with the exhale. You don't force it. It just happens, naturally, effortlessly, as if the book has been waiting for this quiet companionship. And maybe that's why this first page feels so comforting tonight, because it keeps you company without asking anything of you. It doesn't require attention. It doesn't need to be understood. It simply exists beside you, offering its tiny rustle, its faint shiver of movement, its little breath-like sound that blends with yours. Not louder, not brighter, just gently there. You can almost picture it, can't you? A soft pool of golden light, your hand resting loosely, the page lifting with a whisper so subtle you almost wonder if you imagined it. But you didn't. It was real. Just quiet enough to meet you where you are. Maybe this is the part no one ever told you about, that silence doesn't have to be a hollow space. It can be a place where little sounds bloom, the tender murmur of paper, the distant hum of the night, the soft rhythm of your own breath merging with the hush around you. Together, they create a kind of soundscape. One so gentle and delicate that it feels like a sanctuary built from whispers. And the first page is always the one that invites you in. As it turns, as it opens, as it breathes with you, it reminds your mind that it too can soften, that it can slow down, that it can let its edges unfurl just a little. The anxieties that once pushed against the quiet begin to melt into the calm. The silence that once felt too sharp becomes something padded, cushioned, warm. If you listen closely, very closely, then you might notice the page almost waiting for your next breath, ready to rise with you again, not to lead, not to follow, just to accompany. A presence so subtle that it feels like a small kindness. And maybe, tonight, that's enough. There's a certain kind of desk that only exists at night. You know the one, not the daytime desk where responsibilities pile up and lists grow long, but that other version, the quieter one, the one that seems to appear only when the world has dimmed just enough for you to hear your own heartbeat again. It sits in the half-light, calm and unhurried, its wooden surface holding the gentle warmth of the day that just passed. And somehow, without trying, it invites your scattered thoughts to come closer, not to be solved, not to be arranged neatly, just to drift down like soft dust in a slow, graceful descent. Maybe you've felt it before, that hush that gathers around you when the house is still. The air feels slightly cooler, and your fingertips brush the desk as though you're greeting an old friend. You don't have to sit perfectly. You don't have to think clearly. You just let yourself be there in that mellow glow, letting the silence thicken in a way that feels protective rather than intimidating. The desk doesn't stare back. It doesn't judge the weight you've been carrying. It doesn't insist on productivity or clarity. It just holds space. And in that space, your thoughts, The ones that fluttered nervously all day, the ones that buzzed in the back of your mind like tiny winged things, finally begin to settle, slowly, almost shyly, as if the quiet has given them permission to rest. You might notice the way the shadows stretch across the desk in soft lines, like gentle brushstrokes, or the way the edges blur slightly because your eyes are tired in the best sleep-ready way. There's a faint scent of paper, maybe a bit of wood, maybe a trace of ink lingering from earlier. Familiar smells, safe smells, the kind that make the night feel more like a blanket than an empty space. And as you sit there, you might realize that this desk, this simple, unassuming surface, has become a tiny world of its own. A world where the silence doesn't press against you. It supports you lightly, like a hand on your back. A world where even your heaviest thoughts lose their urgency and settle softly, like drifting particles illuminated in the thin beam of a desk lamp. Isn't it strange how peaceful it feels? How quiet moments that once felt too sharp now feel padded and cushioned. Maybe it's because the desk has no expectations. It knows that the night isn't a place for conclusions. It's a place for unwinding. A place where your mind loosens its grip and lets things fall gently into place, not neatly, not completely, but enough. Enough for now. You can almost hear the tiny sounds of relaxation, the delicate creak of the chair as you shift your weight, the faint rustle of your sleeve against the wood, the subtle settling of the house around you. Tiny, grounding sounds that remind you you're not alone in the quiet. And as your thoughts sink softly, like dust finding its resting point, you might notice a bit of warmth spreading through your chest, a kind of relief, a release you didn't have to fight for. The night desk holds you while the world exhales. There's a special kind of lantern that seems to glow differently at night, softer, gentler, as if it knows you're tired in ways you haven't said aloud. When you place it on the desk or near your bedside, it doesn't simply brighten the room. It softens it. The light feels almost like a presence, quiet, attentive, quietly breathing beside you. You've probably felt it before, that warm, golden hush that spreads slowly when a lantern is the only light source in the room. It doesn't flood the space, it caresses it. It warms the edges of your vision while leaving enough shadow for the world to feel dreamlike, half real, comfortably blurred. And in that fragile balance of glow and dimness, something inside you loosens, noticing the first signs of rest. If you look closely, or even if you don't, even if you're simply sitting with your gaze softened, you might feel as though the lantern is listening. Not actively, not in a dramatic way, but in a quiet, steady, reassuring way. The way someone who understands you might listen, without interrupting, without questioning, without trying to fix a single thing, just being there. Sometimes you catch yourself whispering a thought inside your own mind, a worry, a hope, a small confession you've kept tucked away, and the lantern seems to hold it for a moment. It doesn't glow brighter or flicker in response. It simply continues offering that tender amber warmth, letting you know it heard you, that your feelings have a place to land tonight. And I know you've had nights when silence felt too big, too open, as if the quiet itself could swallow your thoughts whole. But here, in the lantern's soft halo, silence becomes something else entirely. It becomes a container, a gentle one, where your emotions can rest without echoing, without spiraling, without rushing in circles. Have you ever noticed how the light falls across your hands, how it softens every line, every small detail, until even your fingers look calmer than they felt minutes ago? Or how the shadows it casts aren't harsh, but velvety, like they're trying to wrap themselves around your anxieties, cushioning them until they lose their sharpness. There's a moment, usually a quiet one, when the lantern seems to murmur, "I'm here," not with words, but with warmth, with patience, with the kind of stillness that feels like a safe place for everything you carry. And you might find, without planning to, that you begin to breathe a little slower. Your chest loosens. The tension behind your sternum starts to melt. Your thoughts drift instead of clinging tightly. The lantern becomes almost like a companion, a small guardian of the quiet. It doesn't chase the darkness away. It simply keeps it soft. And maybe that's exactly what you needed tonight. Not brightness, not clarity, not noise, but a warm glow that listens in silence. A gentle light that tells you, without any words at all, that it's okay to rest now. That you don't have to hold everything. That even the quiet is on your side. There's a special sound that happens when a pen meets paper. A sound so subtle you almost miss it at first. It isn't loud, it isn't sharp. It's more like a soft brushing, a whispering glide, as if the ink itself is exhaling with relief to finally have a place to land. And when you sit with it long enough, when you notice the gentle rhythm of it, something inside you begins to loosen. You know that feeling. When your thoughts have been tangled all day, like threads knotted in quiet frustration, pulling tighter the more you try to yank them free. And then, almost without thinking, you pick up a pen. You let the tip touch the page, and suddenly the knot doesn't feel quite as tight anymore. The ink doesn't judge the shape of your thoughts. It doesn't care if the sentences wander or if the words come out uneven, unfinished. It just moves, slowly, smoothly, willingly. And as it moves, it seems to pull the tension out of your mind, strand by strand, until those thoughts that once darted and buzzed around begin to flatten into lines. Soft, looping lines that stretch across the page like gentle pathways. There's something soothing about the way ink behaves. It doesn't hurry. It spreads in its own time. It travels steadily, trusting that wherever it goes, it's enough. And you might find that your breath matches its pace. A slow inhale as the pen lifts, a quiet exhale as the line continues. You don't force it. You simply follow the movement, the soft scratch, the delicate flow. It becomes a tiny ritual, not to solve anything, but to soften everything. Sometimes you don't even write words, just shapes, curves, small marks that feel good to form, almost like tracing a path in fresh sand with your fingertip. The ink responds gently, obediently, filling the silence with the lightest sound, a soft, intimate sound that anchors you in the present moment. Have you noticed how the paper seems to welcome the ink too? How it absorbs each line without resistance, letting it sink in and become part of the page, as if saying, "It's all right. Leave it here. You don't have to hold this anymore." And maybe that's the real beauty of it. The page becomes a place where your mind can set down its burdens without being asked to explain them. The ink becomes a kind of bridge, guiding your worries out of the tight spaces in your chest and into something open, forgiving and still. As you write or doodle or wander across the page with no plan at all, you might feel a slow unwinding. Thoughts that once felt tangled now drift like loose threads. Tension turns into softness. Silence turns into something textured and safe, filled with the light rustle of paper and the quiet glide of ink. And before you realize it, your mind has become. There's a library you can only enter when you're fully ready to soften, not a second earlier. It doesn't matter whether your eyes are open or closed. The doorway appears only when your mind begins to quiet itself, when something inside you whispers, "I'm tired. I want to feel safe now." And the moment that whisper rises, even faintly, the library awakens. You know this place. Even if you don't consciously remember it, some part of you recognizes the hush that gathers around its entrance. A hush that isn't empty, but full of promise, full of warmth, full of the soft, drifting sounds that happen when time decides it doesn't need to move quite so fast. When you step inside, nothing startles you. The atmosphere settles around you like a familiar blanket. The air is cool in a comforting way, carrying the subtle scent of old paper, worn leather, and something faintly wooden. The aroma of a place that's been loved quietly for years. The shelves aren't arranged in perfect rows. They curve gently, almost like they're breathing with you, and the books resting on them seem to glow just a little under the warm, ambient lighting, as if they're alive in the softest, sleepiest way. And the most beautiful part? This library doesn't demand anything from you. You don't have to choose a book. You don't have to read. You don't even have to think. It simply exists around you, forming a cocoon of gentle sound, the almost imperceptible shift of pages settling, the distant hum of a warm lamp, the soft murmur of a book being placed back onto a shelf by no one you can see. Each sound is delicate, as though designed to soothe the very parts of you that ache for calm. Have you ever noticed how dream places feel oddly personal, even when they're unfamiliar? This library feels like it remembers you, your rhythms, your weariness. The quiet heaviness that sits behind your ribs on nights when silence feels too tall. It offers you corners to rest in, reading nooks softened by cushions, warm pools of golden light where your shoulders naturally unclench. You don't wander here with purpose. You drift, and as you do, the library shifts subtly, almost imperceptibly, shaping itself around your state of mind. If you're feeling overwhelmed, the aisles widen, giving you space to breathe. If you're lonely, the lamps glow a little warmer, their light gathering around you like company. If your thoughts won't quite settle, the distant pages turn themselves, creating a hushed, rhythmic sound that coaxes your mind into stillness. You can sit anywhere, on a velvet-cushioned bench, on the floor, leaning against a sturdy shelf, or even by an arched window that shows nothing but a soft, star-strewn darkness. A night sky that feels endless, yet comforting, as if the whole universe is whispering, "It's okay to rest." And in this library that appears only when you're ready, time doesn't press forward. It drifts, it lingers, it waits, just like the space around you, just like the quiet within you. Everything slows until your breath becomes the most noticeable movement in the room. There's a sound that pages make when they're turned slowly, not the crisp snap of hurried hands, but that softer version, the kind that feels almost shy, a tender, fluttering murmur, like the page is brushing its fingertips against the air. When you hear that sound, even faintly, something inside you instinctively slows down, as if your whole body recognizes the invitation to rest. It's strange, isn't it? How such a tiny sound can feel so comforting. A paper whisper, gentle, fleeting, barely there, yet enough to make the silence feel warm instead of empty. When you sit with a book in a quiet room, especially at night, time begins to behave differently. Minutes loosen, seconds stretch. The easier space between one breath and the next grows soft and velvety, and the act of turning a page becomes its own small ritual, a little ceremony of slowness. Maybe you've noticed it before. That moment when you lift the corner of the paper with your fingertips and pause for just a heartbeat longer than necessary, not because you're thinking, but because it feels good to move slowly, to let the world shrink to this single, gentle motion. As the page glides forward, you hear that subtle, feather-light sound, like fabric brushing against skin, or a secret being whispered too quietly for words. It's the sound of something moving without urgency, the sound of a mind beginning to drift into quiet. And perhaps the sweetest part is how the sound fades. It doesn't end abruptly. It trails off softly, like a sigh dissolving into the night. A reminder that nothing in this moment needs to rush. Not the page, not the thoughts in your head, not the rise and fall of your breath. Have you ever wondered why this sound is so soothing? Maybe it's because it carries no expectations. Maybe it's because it reflects the pace your body wishes it could live in all the time. That gentle, unforced rhythm where everything feels just a little softer around the edges. Some nights, when your mind is restless, the whisper of turning pages becomes a kind of anchor, a real, tactile sound that brings you back into your body, grounding you in the tender present. It's reassuring, in a quiet way, offering you a place to settle, a place to listen, a place to simply be. You might even imagine time itself turning like a page, slowly, carefully, easing the day closed so the night can cradle you without interruption. The page turn becomes a cue, a soft signal that the world is ready to dim its lights and hush its noise, a permission slip for your mind to release the tight grip it's kept all day. And as more pages turn, one after another, each whisper blending into the next, a gentle rhythm forms. A rhythm that isn't demanding or exact, a rhythm that feels like it was crafted just for calming nights like this. You settle into it, into the hush, into the softness, into the secret pace of slow time. There's a moment, somewhere between wakefulness and the first hint of sleep, when your mind starts to create without effort. You're not directing anything, not trying to imagine a scene or build a narrative. It just begins, quietly, softly, as if a hidden part of you has been waiting all day for the chance to weave its own gentle story. It usually happens when your eyes close and the darkness settles in a comforting way, not heavy or oppressive, but soft, like velvet draped lightly over your thoughts. In that darkness, shapes start to appear, faint outlines at first, the suggestion of a path or a room or a night sky. You don't force it. You simply observe as the scene blossoms on its own. This is the story that writes itself, and it feels different from anything you create consciously. It's slower, calmer, more tender with your mind. Sometimes the first thing you notice is a glow. A lamp, a window, a distant lantern, opening the scene like a quiet invitation. Other times it's a sound, a faint rustle, a footstep softened by carpet, a whisper of wind slipping past. Those small sensations form the foundation, as if your inner world is setting the stage gently, giving you something to lean into. And then the story unfurls, not with logic, not with structure, but with softness. Characters drift in and out, not needing names or faces. Rooms shift shape depending on what feels comforting. Time stretches, curves, dissolves. The story follows you, not the other way around. It adjusts to your breathing, synchronizes with the slowing beat of your heart, letting the narrative soften your edges one breath at a time. Have you ever noticed how comforting that feels? How the mind, when left unguarded and unhurried, naturally builds a world that's safe for you, a world where there are no deadlines, no expectations, just the tender unfolding of images that want nothing but to hold you gently. Maybe the story begins in a place you love, a quiet library, a peaceful forest, a room lit only by the warm glow of a desk lamp. Or maybe it's somewhere new, but somehow familiar in its warmth, like a childhood memory you never lived but still recognize. The details don't matter. What matters is the feeling, that weightless, drifting sensation that lets your mind rest while still being beautifully awake. And as you drift deeper, the story loosens even further. Sentences blur into images, images dissolve into impressions. Impressions melt into sensations, warmth, safety, softness. It's like being carried by a current so gentle you barely feel it, yet you know you're moving toward rest, toward quiet, toward a place where sleep can finally reach you. And the most beautiful, a part, you don't have to hold on to any of it. The story doesn't ask for your memory or your attention. It writes itself in real time, fading the moment you no longer need it. like a companion who keeps you company only long enough to ease you into peace, then steps back, letting the darkness cradle you. There's always a final paragraph, not in the book you're reading, but in the quiet story of your night. It doesn't come with a sense of ending or closure. It doesn't try to summarize anything. It simply settles beside you softly, like someone choosing to stay awake just long enough to keep you company until sleep finds you on its own. You can almost feel it forming now, that gentle, lingering moment where everything in the room has softened. The light has dimmed to its faintest glow. The air feels warmer, or maybe you've just sunk deeper into your own comfort. Even the silence is calmer than it was before, padded with the faintest traces of the paper whispers, ink trails, and drifting thoughts that guided you here. This paragraph doesn't rush. It unfolds in slow motion, the way dawn itself approaches, quietly, respectfully, almost shy. Maybe you notice the stillness first, that deep kind of stillness that only appears when the mind has loosened every last knot and the body has released its hold on the day. It's the type of stillness that makes your eyelids heavy, not out of exhaustion, but out of relief. Like they trust the darkness now, like they want to rest in it. And in that stillness, the final paragraph waits with you. It doesn't urge you to fall asleep. It doesn't try to soothe you with explanations or instructions. It simply stays, breathing alongside you, matching the slow rhythm of your chest, rising and falling under the covers. There's something comforting in the way this moment feels suspended, as if time has decided to pause, not for dramatic effect, but to let you rest without being carried forward too quickly. It's like the night is holding its breath for you, offering one last pocket of calm before you drift away entirely. Have you ever felt that gentle in-between? That quiet threshold where you're no longer fully awake, but not yet deeply asleep? Where the world around you feels far away, softened, almost dreamlike. This last paragraph lives in that space. It leans into the silence in the most compassionate way. It doesn't fear it. It doesn't fill it. It simply sits with it. The way a friend might sit with you during a long night, offering presence without words. You might imagine this paragraph as a small, glowing shape at the edge of your awareness. Not bright, not demanding, just warm enough to reassure you that you're not alone in the dark. It watches over you the way a candle might, or the way the faintest thread of morning light sometimes slips in through the curtains long before you open your eyes. And as your thoughts begin to blur, drifting into that soft, hazy place where dreams begin forming their first gentle echoes, the last paragraph doesn't fade abruptly. It thins, it dissolves, it becomes part of the quiet. By the time dawn arrives, with its pale, washed-out glow and its promise of a new beginning, this paragraph will have already done its work. It will have kept you company in the darkness, held you through the hush, and guided you gently into the long, deep stretch of sleep. You don't have to do anything now. Just let the final paragraph rest beside you and let the night carry you the rest of the way.